And now joining us are Tina Sfondeles, the Sun-Times chief political reporter. Welcome back to the Sun-Times, Tina.
Thank you.
We missed you, and you were on an interesting journey.
Yes, I was.
Remind us where you were before where you went.
A little bit all over the place. I was in Washington, D.C. during the pandemic. I worked for Insider, and then I worked for Politico. I moved back home in January. Lynn Sweet was my fairy godmother who helped me come back home and was awesome to me while I was there. And I came back to the Sun-Times in late March.
Good to see you back.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome home, Tina.
Thank you.
And Dave McKinney, he's an old timer on our show now. Not old, but an old timer. Welcome back, Dave.
Got the gray hair.
Dave is at WBEZ, political reporter WBEZ. So let's just jump right into it.
Alumni of the Chicago Sun-Times.
I'm sorry, Lynn?
And a former Chicago Sun-Times.
That is correct.
Bureau chief.
All Chicago Sun-Times, past and present. That's very cool. So I wanted to jump in with both of you. I'll kick it off with you, Dave. But just to give us, we're about 5 weeks or so out from the primaries, the June 28th primaries, and the hot ticket races, the GOP gubernatorial primary. So where does that stand? What would you say is the state of the race right now?
Well, I mean, today early voting starts, so I guess we're really, it's the point where the rubber's hitting the road. I mean, it really looks like a two-person race right now between Richard Irvin from Aurora, the mayor there, who is backed by billionaire hedge fund founder Kenneth Griffin, $45 million from him. And then his main rival is State Senator Darren Bailey, who is from downstate Illinois, south of Effingham. And is he's been trying to curry favor with former President Donald Trump. The two of them, in a recent poll that WGN TV did, are basically within the margin of error of one another. Irvin is ahead of Bailey, but you can just sort of tell the dimensions, the contours of the race right now with the ads. They're pretty much focused on Irvin and Bailey. They're attacking one another, and then throw in the DGA, the Democratic Governors Association. They're getting involved to promote Bailey, because I think there's some thinking among Democrats that Bailey would be a better matchup for Governor Pritzker in the fall. So they're trying to promote him over the Mayor Irvin, who would have seemingly an endless bank account to draw from. So two-person race right now, it looks like.
And some people have been kind of surprised at the close margin between Irvin and Bailey, given how many millions and millions of dollars Irvin has had to play with. Were you surprised by that? And what do you think that means at this point in the race? Does it mean much?
Well, no, I wasn't surprised by it. And the thing is, I've never been one to rule out Darren Bailey, because, if you go back 4 years and you look at the primary that former Governor Bruce Rauner had, Jeannie Ives drew, I forget if it was 48 or 49% of the primary vote against Rauner. And so you figure that that was a pretty good kind of template for what Bailey hopes to get. I mean, he hopes to be on the winning side, obviously, but there is a very deep red swath of Republican voters south of Interstate 80 that Bailey has been trying to draw from, with a very conservative, very Trump friendly, very anti-abortion, very pro-gun kind of ideology. He just floated a digital ad. I don't know if it's going on TV or not, but one in which he is standing in of papers that looks like, it's 3 feet thick, and it's the Illinois budget. And he draws from his truck a flamethrower and sets it on fire. And I mean, we've seen variations of this kind of ad before, where people are shooting things at things and all that. So he's stirring up the masses downstate, and that in that primary 4 years ago, I think I looked at the numbers, and I think about 52 or 53% of the primary vote that year came from outside of Cook and the Collar counties. So that gives some idea where Bailey is looking to draw support from. And he's also working hard in the Collar counties to try to keep Irvin's numbers here down as well.
Tina, you've been on top of this race as well, and so please jump in and add your thoughts. But Bailey doesn't have this, he doesn't have that conservative base or that downstate base all to himself, does he?
I would say, just as Dave said, there's a large swath of Trump supporters in Illinois. If you look at the numbers, a lot of red counties. So he is speaking to those people. And, Richard Irvin would argue that he's saying that he's a true Republican, but he is kind of a moderate. So if voters are looking for a more conservative voice, they could choose Bailey over Irvin. And yes, as Dave said as well, Bailey is running ads in Chicago. I just saw it on NBC. Very smiley ones. I did also see the one he's talking about, and there's like a heavy metal song at the end. It's kind of like one of those like rage commercials. And I think it's pretty effective for a downstate voice. So they're all trying to, try to do their commercials based on what area they're trying to get in. And I think Darren Bailey is trying to get a little bit of those suburban voters that are kind of upset at everything.
And that flamethrower ad that Dave's talking about, it he kind of makes fun of Richard of Irvin's ad, where he has these big gigantic shears and he's saying he's going to cut taxes, he's going to cut this, he's going to cut that. It's like Bailey kind of one-upped him on it though.
100%. Yeah, he was standing in front of the Capitol with these gigantic scissors from Home Depot or wherever, and in which he says that he would not pardon Mike Madigan, in which he wouldn't be allowed to as governor. So people are getting kind of frustrated at some of the language of the ads because they're not really factually correct. Mm-hmm. So that's stirring up a lot of things right now with voters, with reporters, with all of that. And so it's kind of funny to see Bailey make fun of that one ad.
But then how much real difference is there? I mean, everybody's trying to beat up on Irvin about whether or not he voted for Trump. That's not really an issue. What about the issues? Is there much daylight between any of these candidates?
Well, he is saying that whether he supports Trump and what his views are on abortion don't matter to voters, which is 100% not true right now. So that's the problem. Is GOP primary voters tend to be pretty conservative. So he has been running his ad, showing like little glimpses. He has said he's pro-life, told us a little bit about it, won't elaborate, and he's trying to bank on that. That's enough to appease those GOP voters. And then if he wins, he'll be a moderate. He will campaign as a moderate and try to go against Pritzker. So It's going to be an interesting transition for him if he makes it.
So
what's your take?
I agree with both of them on their analysis, but I want to add another layer and a question. So we have another big money backer in this thing, Richard Uihlein of Lake Forest. People might have heard of his business, Uihlein Industries. He's thrown several million into Gary Rabin's race, who is another Republican primary challenger. But what is the path that Rabin has towards the nomination, even with the multi-million backing from Uihlein? Tina and Dave,
Uihlein is also a Bailey backer. So Uihlein is the reason why Bailey is on the air in Chicago now.
Yeah.
So it is a Ken Griffin versus Uihlein battle, which it's fun to see people who have different political views trying to show their strength via different candidates.
Everyone assumed that Griffin was just going to run away with this because he had those zillions of dollars, but he's getting some competition on the dollars.
Yeah, and Dave said it was early voting starts today. So I mean, we got 5 weeks left, and that doesn't really matter these days because there's so many ways for people to vote. And so we're going to see a lot of crazy money and crazy ads coming up in the next 5 weeks, but the damage might have already been done. And as we saw in that poll, it is really close. It's going to be very close.
Lynn, I think to your point that the clash of titans, I guess, between Uihlein and Griffin, Uihlein's money has really enabled Darren Bailey to be competitive. I mean, Rabin, Schimpf, the former state senator Paul Schimpf, a political unknown, Max Solomon, a lawyer, and who's the other one I'm leaving out? I mean,
Jesse Sullivan.
Yeah, Jesse Sullivan. So I mean, the four others have really, I mean, not only not registered in my brain, but they're failing to get any traction at all. And part of that is that they don't have money to be on television or to produce digital ads or to be putting direct mail pieces in our mailboxes. It's really right now a contest between, as we said at the start, Bailey and Griffin. And I don't think if Uihlein had come into this mix as he did with, Tina, you may remember it's up somewhere like 5 or 6 million now for Bailey. If that money hadn't been there for Bailey, I think Irvin, in spite of a very rocky go of things, would probably be a runaway. And so Bailey is competitive for that reason. And the other thing that's fascinating about Bailey, I think, is that he has mobilized a group of people on Facebook. I mean, he's putting these, it really kind of is a different way in which campaigns are being run now. I mean, Facebook is such a powerful tool for these campaigns, especially the ones without money. I mean, he has tons of followers. Bailey is putting up daily messages to them, mobilizing them. And so it's another pathway for him to reach into people's studies and living rooms in a pretty cost-effective way.
And part of that is,
Go ahead, Lynn.
I think part of it is that Darren Bailey is campaigning as if he has nothing to lose. He's out there, he'll talk to reporters, he's just more comfortable speaking. Irvine comes across as scripted and conscripted in what he says. But could you explain to our viewers, you had mentioned, Dave, the Democratic Governors Association ads. So those are ads that are clever because to a Democratic ears, they are critical, pro-life, pro-gun. I can't remember what the conservative supposed hits were on him, but to a Republican audience, this is only great news. So could both of you explain what is going on and what the intended impact could be? And could there be a boomerang effect where it doesn't turn out the way the Democratic Governors Association thought? Tina?
Oh, sure. David, this is the part where we're supposed to fear being used in a commercial right now. Right here. Okay.
Tread carefully.
Yeah, let's be careful. So with the Democratic, the DGA situation, it is intended to rile up GOP voters. So as you said, if a Democrat's watching this ad that says he's pro-life, pro-guns, they're like, oh my gosh, but the commercial is not for them. The commercial is for a Republican primary voter who's sitting at home and being like, it's going to get them to vote for Bailey, which is what they want because they believe it's an easier person to beat than Irvin based on the money and even some things about him. And in terms of that's the plot of, okay, I lost my train of thought, but basically the Republicans they're trying to rile them up to go vote for Bailey.
Right.
Lynn, something that I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and you remember this, Laura, you probably do too, but if you go way, way, way back in political history here, back to the 1996 Illinois Democratic Senate primary, that was the first one where Dick Durbin became, where he wound up, 1996 is when he became a U.S. Senator. In the Republican primary that year, it was a two-person race between, at that point, the lieutenant governor of Illinois, the Republican lieutenant governor named Bob Custra, and then a state representative who had, he was kind of a darling of the far right, Al Salvi. And a lot of people counted Al Salvi out of the mix because, they thought he was too conservative, too fringe. But, he wound up winning the race. And where I think the similarities here are interesting is that Custra, because he had the backing of the establishment Republican organizations everywhere, Jim Edgar was behind him. He thought he was just going to walk away with this. And so he was very inaccessible. He ran a Rose Garden campaign, basically, where he wasn't, being accessible to reporters. He wasn't doing press conferences. He was just sort of kind of a shut-in, a political shut-in. And he wound up losing, I think, because of that. What I think we see happening here now is the same kind of effect with Richard Irvin. Irvin has not been out and about very often with the rest of the field. I mean, they're doing this weird dance on debates where, we have coming up next week, I believe, two television stations holding competing debates at the same time. And they're Irvin is on one stage and the rest are on the other. So I wonder if that's going to be a factor here as we get down to it, because the thing about Bailey, if you go onto his website, I've never seen this in a candidate before. If you go into his website, he has an events tab that shows like a calendar of everything he's doing. And it goes back, 2 or 3 months, and it shows the month ahead. And the guy is working his tail off. He's all over the state. And you just get a sense that he is really, really pressing the flesh. And you just do not see that with Irvin. I mean, he's convening city council meetings in Aurora, and that's about it. You're not seeing him up. And I
But
think
part of that is because
But,
he's trying to avoid us, and he doesn't want to be caught out. And before we leave this, I just wanted to come back to the Trump factor, because one of the things that Bailey is hoping might be an ace in the hole for him, and he's been courting, is Donald Trump's endorsement. Tina, what do you know about that, and when can we expect to hear one way or the other on that?
Well, he said he went to Mar-a-Lago in December to talk to Trump. This is what Bailey has said. He went to a fundraiser a couple of weeks ago. He had a picture taken with Trump. He probably paid for it, unclear, but it's one of those where you paid a lot of money. And he's been advertising that. It's actually in the DGA ad as well, this picture of Bailey and Trump. So everyone's using it exactly how he wanted it. So he has been seeking it. It is unclear whether Trump will actually endorse, but if you look at the Pennsylvania race, the governor's race, he endorsed 3 days before. So in our world of early voting, you don't really know if a last minute Trump endorsement is going to make a huge deal. Mm-hmm. And people who have talked about this say Trump likes to pick someone who he knows is going to win. This is pretty close. And people look at all the national political stories of keeping track of which races Trump endorsed. That's the whole story of, did Trump win this race or not, even though he's not a candidate. So it'll be interesting to see whether he actually does pick Bailey, who is a Trump supporter.
So one postscript on Trump in Illinois. So far, he has endorsed in the congressional races. There's Mary Miller, who's a freshman Republican, who is thrown in a battle with another Republican, Rodney Davis. And her whole campaign is based on the endorsement of Trump, and that she is the most ardent Trump supporter around. She is allied with Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. But one thing to watch for is if Trump comes to Illinois at some point. He had a rally downstate before the 2020 election. He is capable, perhaps, of moving some votes in the Republican primaries for governor and congressman if he comes in for Mary Miller, even if he doesn't make a formal endorsement. But we'll just have, we'll see about that. But at least we know that for sure one race is officially in play, where you could see if indeed there is a Trump impact in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty good barometer. I have a group of Facebook friends, I guess, high school classmates from the central part of the state. These people are all Republicans, and it's just interesting kind of, whenever there's a discussion that turns political, these people are all Bailey people, and they're hardcore Bailey people. So I kind of think that there's sort of a built-in assumption from many of those folks that they know Bailey is a Trump guy, whether Trump endorses or not. And Trump has a relationship not only with Mary Miller, but was part of the Eastern Bloc, called the Eastern Bloc group of legislators, because they actually, were talking at one point, 6 or 8 of these House members, when Bailey was in the House, of running resolutions to secede from Illinois. They actually wanted to carve out Chicago into its own state. So they have some pretty radical views that way. But I just think Bailey is a real force that the urban people are aware of, and you can sort of see the negative tenor behind the urban ads toward Bailey demonstrates they see him as a real threat.
And it's been a little bit different now in these last couple of weeks because it's anti-Bailey. And when they first started running their campaign, they were running like they were running against J.B. Pritzker right away. Like, we're in it, we got this, we're running against J.B. Pritzker. And then you saw that transition into hitting Bailey pretty hard.
But
go ahead, David. And then I want to move on.
This might have been something on last week's show, but I don't think you can underestimate the impact of that press conference that Irvin had last week, because he called people together, and it was something. Tina, I know you were at that, where the point of it was to try to draw focus on the tragedy at the LaSalle Veterans Home, where 36 veterans died of COVID-19 in the worst outbreak of any state-run congregate care facility, and quickly. The focus at that press conference turned toward a national abortion ban, as Mitch McConnell had talked about, and then Trump. And it just looked as if, Irvin was in quicksand. He just couldn't get out of it. And he didn't have answers that really, could address these questions. And I look at that and think, given the expertise of the people surrounding Irvin, their experience, how it is that they could send him into an environment like that and not have him have better answers to those questions. Because he just universally, I think people, even allies of his that I talked to, were like, whoa, what was that? So I think it was a very bumpy press conference that, if he's smart, he'll come out and do another one, and we'll all forget about that one.
Well, for their part, they think they did a really good job on that. They say that they did exactly what they wanted.
That's called spin, Tina. I want to move quickly, and I want to get to some city stuff with Tina. But first, Dave, update us on the story, a great story you did this week. Speaking of Ken Griffin, of how he is investing his money these days, and some connections to some firearms or related holdings that he's invested in, and why should we care about that?
Well, I mean, of course, Ken Griffin, the founder of the Citadel hedge fund, the $51 billion hedge fund in Chicago, he's put $45 million behind Richard Irvin. So, and he was out of the gate. Griffin was with really, really sharp attacks against Governor Pritzker. I mean, he called Pritzker's response to the crime surge in Chicago last fall. He called it a disgrace, and he's only, the rhetoric has only kind of been amplified since then. And if you look at Irvin's messaging, it's the same thing. And so, at any rate, with this big anti-crime push that both Griffin and Irvin have looked at, I've been focused on filings that Citadel and its cousin Citadel Securities have made with the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission. It shows all of their holdings, and at the same time that Griffin and Irvin are attacking Pritzker and Democrats on guns, the Citadel hedge fund and its market-making cousin have fairly significant holdings in gun makers and ammunition companies, and they say that's really the only reason they do that is because they are Citadel's a market maker, and they're the ones that if you have Robinhood on your phone or Ameritrade or whatever it is, and you punch in you want an immediate trade, the trade goes through them. They are the ones who basically put that stock in your account immediately. They say they need to have these gun and ammo companies at their disposal. From a messaging standpoint, from a symbolic standpoint, it doesn't look good. The Democrats have made an issue of this, and in the most recent filing this week, Citadel's holdings have grown from up to about $140 million in this sector. So it's a bit of a PR kind of issue for Citadel to have to navigate through.
We're also speaking days after just the saddest, latest attack in America, the massacre in Buffalo by a shooter. So the issue of guns is not an abstract one by any means, and we had our own ongoing issues with gun shootings in Chicago too.
Well, just recently, Lynn, I mean, we have a 16 or 17-year-old boy who was shot in the chest fatally at the Bean, and that's
over the weekend.
And so it's kind of it hits close to home. There's no question.
And speaking of guns, Tina, you covered your J.B. Pritzker's press conference. Now, it wasn't just J.B. Pritzker. There were lots of politicians there yesterday.
Lots of surprise guests yesterday.
Yeah, we want to hear about that. His signing of the ghost gun legislation. Tell us what that was about and who showed up and what some of the politics behind it.
Sure. So this was the top legislative priorities for Democrats to ban ghost guns, and these are guns that do not have serial numbers. They are also very easy to make. There are kits. You could use a 3D printer to make them. I believe in this law, though, it's also guns that have kind of defaced serial numbers too. So the problem with that is that people, first of all, they're very easy to make. People are using them. You can't track them. And so this is kind of trying to clamp down on that to ensure that these are not on the streets. And they are. There's crazy, so many, triple-fold increase every year. State police have hundreds of it already in possession from crimes this year. CPD does as well. Joe Biden talked about this last month in the Rose Garden. He held up one of the gun kits or a ghost gun to show how he did not make it, obviously, but it was ready to go, and just showing how it looks just like a gun and it has been used in crimes. And the scary thing is that people who should not have guns had an easier access to those types of guns. So all of the protections you may have in terms of mental illness or a felon in possession of a gun. They got away with it by having these types of ghost guns. So Illinois is the first state in the Midwest to ban these guns. But there's clearly going to be all sorts of problems because we are surrounded by all states who still have these ghost guns. And there's no federal legislation or anything currently. So that's going to continue to be an issue. But here in Illinois, people will be charged with a misdemeanor and I believe a second offense, a felony. I don't know if that's enough to stop the people, but it will get some of these ghost guns in possession of in a safer place or with police or in police custody. The press conference yesterday was with the bill sponsors, which is State Senator Jackie Collins and State Rep Cam Buckner. Both are running for office. So Cam Buckner just announced he's running for mayor last week, which we had all been expecting. So it was a Governor Pritzker press conference, but Mayor Lightfoot did come with the superintendents. And that was kind of a surprise appearance.
Was she invited?
I don't believe that she was. I believe that they kind of let the sponsors invite who they wanted to. And I do think it is a political issue. I think it was Cam Buckner related, like her rivals out there show, in this widely like lots of pictures, lots of people there, lots of media showing that he's fighting guns. And 3 days ago, or however many days ago, we have a 16-year-old, killed in Millennium Park. So it is a problem. And so I do think that's the reason that she went. I don't believe it was a Pritzker Lightfoot feud. But she was there. She was our front page picture today with behind Pritzker. So she's in it. So was Cam. So there's a little bit of drama that was behind the scenes, but everybody was smiley.
Yeah. So why is she so afraid of Cam Buckner? He's just the most recent person to get in the race. Tell us a little bit about Cam Buckner and why she might be so concerned.
I don't think she's concerned. I think she's competitive. And
okay.
Like I said,
that sounds like Lori Lightfoot.
Yeah, I don't think she's worried. Cam Buckner is a state rep from Chicago. He's African American. He's sponsored a lot of like positive legislation for Chicago. He has targeted gun violence. He has some bad stuff. He's had 2 DUIs, which people have been talking a lot about. And it was kind of like a slow announcement. We had expected it a little, a couple of weeks ago. He's in it. And I don't know, he might be the strongest contender against her currently because we haven't heard any super big names. I know people wanted Congressman Quigley in there as a likable person that, maybe he could take on Lori Lightfoot, but he chose not to. So we haven't heard any super huge names. And I think people like Cam, people know a little bit about him and know what his priorities are. So I do think that Lori is just being competitive with her new competitor.
One little footnote on Cam Buckner's announcement. When you look at the announcement video, it was clear that it was shot in the winter because there's snow on the ground. So clearly he had been contemplating this move much before his actual announcement came.
I think it's with Buckner and Lightfoot, crime, I think is going to be an interesting flashpoint between the two of those. You
having a party there, Dave?
happy people on Navy Pier. It's going to be a flashpoint because Buckner was one of the main legislative architects of the Safety Act, which was a big criminal justice package that came out of Springfield that included the abolition of cash bail. And of course, Republicans have been, trying to push this thing and get it repealed because they think that, that's just going to put more, dangerous felons and people like that out on the road, out on the streets here. And Lightfoot, of course, has got, the crime has tagged her in a way because it's worsened so much on her watch. So I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch between those two. And one last point real quickly is I think anytime you see somebody going up against an incumbent, in order for the challenger to really stand a good chance of prevailing, the field has to be cleared. And don't forget, we still have Willie Wilson in the mix. So, if there's an anti-Lightfoot, group of voters out there, there could be the two of them splitting that up in a way, which works to Lori Lightfoot's advantage. So I think as long as, there's a third or fourth or however many other people in the field beyond Buckner, it works to his disadvantage.
Right. Tina, you want to take the last word before we wrap up?
Sure. I was just noting how early in the GOP primary for governor, crime was going to be the big issue, and they're polling about how we all care about crime. You could see that's kind of they've gotten away from that. And there is polling now that show people are more concerned with the economy and inflation and jobs than crime. So now it looks like this is going to be the major issue in the mayoral race instead.
Yes, well, it should be an issue because it's a huge problem for the city, and all hands should be on deck. And all hands were great today. I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Tina and Dave, for being with us.